to talk about Ukraine and Russia?
But you can go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So could you bring some clarification? Maybe it's very clear, but I didn't understand. Your colleague at the White House just said that the president intends to sign the Congress bill on to tighten sanctions against Russia, and on the other hand, Secretary Kerry in London said that the sanction could be lifted very quickly. It's on President Putin's choice. And he had some very appeasing comments saying that in the last days, Russia has taken some very constructive moves. So is there a contradiction between what your colleague at the White House said and what the Secretary said?
I don't believe so, but let me see if I can try to answer all of your questions here, and I'm sure if I don't get to one, you'll let me know. So as my colleague at the White House announced, the president intends to sign the Ukraine Freedom Support Act despite having significant concerns. The administration has worked together closely with allies and partners in Europe and internationally to build a broad coalition of countries to impose sanctions, as you all know, because we talk about it frequently in here, that impose real costs on Russia for its aggressive actions in Ukraine. And we've sent an unmistakable signal condemning Russia's actions while mitigating the spillover impact on American businesses, international energy markets, and the global economy. While this legislation appropriately preserves the flexibility of time and calibrates sanctions with our international partners, it does send a confusing message to our allies by appearing to move forward on new sanctions outside of our close consultations with them. And so we certainly acknowledge that, and I think that's why my colleague referenced the fact that the president has concerns about it. Obviously the decision was made. The legislation provides the president to waive the sanctions provisions as appropriate and when determined to be in the national security interest of the United States. So it provides that flexibility as well. So I don't believe it's changed our policy in that regard. It also still remains the case that Russia has a choice to make, and the Secretary talked about this today. While certainly we've talked a bit in the last couple of weeks about actions they've taken, including humanitarian convoys moving across the border, Russian assistance moving across the border, and that is concerning to us. They have an off-ramp, and they've long had an off-ramp. If they choose to implement the Minsk protocols, then certainly there's an opportunity to change the course of the sanctions that we've put in place. I think the third question you asked was about the Secretary's comments, so let me work to address those as well. As you have seen over the course of the last couple of days, while we still have remaining concerns, we would also welcome reports that violence has decreased markedly over the last few days in eastern Ukraine. This is a positive step and an opportunity to advance the prospects for a lasting political solution. But I don't want to overstate that, nor do we, and that's one of the reasons why he also reiterated ongoing concerns we have. We understand there are discussions are ongoing to set the next date for formal talks of the Trilateral Contact Group. We certainly support that. We're also concerned about reports from the OSCE's Special Monitoring Mission about violence and threats being perpetrated against OSCE monitors by the Russian-backed separatists. And again, Russia has a choice. There are specific steps they can take to implement the Minsk protocols. They can do that. That's in their power. And if they do that, obviously that will have an impact on the actions we take. Did I address all of your questions? Or tried to?
More than that.
Okay. Sorry, that was a long answer. Keep going.
No, but still, I mean, don't you see any contradiction between the White House, I mean, saying that the president is ready to impose new sanctions, and on the other hand, the Secretary of State having some very optimistic comments about Russia's behavior?
No, because there have been some positive steps, but I don't want to overstate that in the last couple of days as it relates to a decrease in violence. They both feel that there are steps that Russia has not taken, they need to take. There are ongoing aggressive actions as it relates to Russia's incursion into Ukraine that need to change in order for our approach to sanctions to change.
So does that mean then that even though he's going to sign the bill, the administration does not intend to enact sanctions outside of the consultative process that you have been doing with the Europeans?
Well, that's been an important component, as you know, from the beginning of the process. And I'm not going to predict what we'll do in the future. It gives the ability to do that, but I don't have anything more to lay out for you in the future.
You and your colleague at the White House both said that it sends a confusing message. Well, so why would the president send a confusing message?
Well, the legislation also provides, because he weighed the pros and cons of the legislation, and weighed the pros outweighed the cons, and that's sometimes what happens with legislation.
What are the pros?
Obviously, we are strong supporters, as you know, of Ukraine and the future of Ukraine, the sovereignty of Ukraine, and sending a strong message that we want to see them succeed. But there are certain components of it that the reason we've spoken out specifically about them is to be clear about where we have concerns and send that message to the international community.
In other words, even though he's going to sign it, the administration has no plan to go ahead and actually impose the sanctions that are that this legislation.
Well, I noted for a reason that the legislation provides the president to the ability to waive the sanctions provisions as appropriate, but it also gives the ability to move forward if you want to.
Right. So, but you're going to waive them.
I'm not going to make
just
a prediction.
Like you're going to waive the human rights concerns.
I'm not going to make a
Egypt.
prediction of that, Matt. Obviously, legislation provides a range of options. So we'll leave the room for the president to make his own decisions. Do we have any more in Ukraine before we move on? Ukraine?
Yeah.
Russia. Go ahead.
What do you make of the move by Russia's central bank to raise its key interest rate from 10.5 to 17%?
I don't have any specific analysis of their economic moves domestically. I think the secretary spoke this morning to the collapse of the ruble and some of the economic challenges that obviously Russia is dealing with within their country. And as he stated one, there are costs, of course, attached to Russia's attempt to annex Crimea and its continued support of separatists. But the economic situation in Russia and many of the choices they're making are not due solely to sanctions. It's more complicated. It involves oil prices and general economic mismanagement in Russia, and those all play a significant role. So the lack of economic diversification and development of innovation and entrepreneurship over the past decade has also left Russia overly dependent on hydrocarbons, and some of these issues all factor into the economic challenges that they're facing today.
Do U.S. policymakers regard that the diminishing value of the ruble tends to increase instability in the region because it makes Vladimir Putin, in order to distract ordinary Russians from their economic hardships, more likely to engage in foreign adventurism?
I think I'd again point you to what the Secretary said in response to a very similar question earlier today. Obviously, the sanctions are not targeted at the Russian people. They are targeted, they're making clear that there are costs attached. And Russia has a choice they can make to change the course of these sanctions. Obviously, that's up to President Putin to make that choice. But has it incentivized him to take more action? No, I wouldn't put it in those terms. Do we have any more in Russia or Ukraine?